Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Agile Actually. And the topic of discussion this week is Agile coaching and life coaching and where the two meet and where the two should be separate. What's your thoughts on this, Martin?
I think it's a really interesting topic because I've seen quite a lot of folks that don't have any experience in either Scrum Mastery or Agile coaching, trying to do those things within a domain that they have no particular experience in. So I think my feeling is that if you're going to be an agile coach for software teams, you probably need to understand the trials and tribulations of software teams. You probably want to have worked on and with software teams in some shape or form in order to understand what their world is like. Just like I wouldn't go be an agile coach for a finance team, right? That we're doing accounts and accountancy because I don't understand their domain. I don't understand their topic. But I could probably leverage as a bit of a consultant some of the skills that I have in their space, but I'm going to be relying on their expertise more than is probably expected.
So, there's something I'd like to come back to there because I think as an Agile coach, you don't need domain expertise. And you use the term Agile consultant. And I'm just curious, let's tease out the difference because I think it's a subtle and powerful difference between, I think, the three domains: the life coach, the Agile coach, and the Agile consultant. So I'm
I'd like your take on what an agile coach is because I definitely feel like I wouldn't deliberately put myself in that category. Although I have done some coaching, I would consider myself more of an agile consultant.
sure. So I think that it's hard to define one without the other, I would suggest. So to be an Agile consultant, you need to know more than one framework.
Yep.
You need to have been in a team that delivers something. So you need experience in actually building something, be it product owner, scrum master, developer, uh, Kanban team member, extreme programming team member. You've actually helped ship things. You need an awareness of metrics,
Mm-hmm.
and you need an understanding of business. So you can understand what a value proposition is. You should be able to read a balance sheet. You can complete a cost of delay calculation. You can complete a return on investment calculation. This will help you be an agile consultant. And as a consultant, you will offer your advice and thoughts based on your experience.
Yep.
The differentiation as an agile coach is you may not have expertise in the domain, but you can apply your expertise in the process, understanding generic business principles, and then in a very coaching fashion, ask questions to guide the team, the individuals, the organization to then embrace faster feedback loops. And so this is where you might start understanding organizational design and other things. I think you need an awareness of business as a domain, but you don't need a deep understanding of a technical domain,
That
but it can help.
of that particular business.
Of that, like, basically, there's three fundamental business models. There's a for-profit model, there is for societal growth model, and there is a sustainability model, which is a balance of those two. And
Okay.
so if you understand that you're in a for-profit business, you better be able to read a balance sheet and
Yeah.
understand that every investment needs a return on investment. If you're working for a charity, a government organization, or a societal development model, you need to be equipped with tools to be able to measure the impact of your products and your services on your society, right? And if you're
Yep.
sustainable, then you blend both them together. So having that business understanding should be able to help you. The reason I say this, I've worked in many organizations where I wasn't an expert. I've worked in defense, and I wasn't an expert on what they were doing, but I could help ask them questions to guide them towards the outcome they needed. I worked in pharmaceutical and energy, where I was definitely not an expert in either of those, but I had enough understanding around the process mechanics and business mechanics to help the teams figure the problem out. And that's where you become the coach, because you help the client understand what to do. But you would step into the consultant role because you'd have to say, like, let me introduce a framework called Scrum. Let me introduce a method called Kanban.
Okay. So I think then that although I wouldn't describe myself as an agile coach by my definition, I would perhaps describe myself as more of an agile coach by your definition there, right? That there are times when I've worked with organizations in exactly, aerospace, defense, where I was never in the military. I have no idea the ramifications of that apart from what I see in movies and TV, and right, which is not the best place to get your information for anything consistent. But understand, usually I work with software teams. I would caveat that almost 100% of the time, I'm usually engaged with organizations that are building some kind of software, and they want me to help them with that. In that context, I feel like I have the competence to be able to both coach and consult for software teams in many different business contexts.
But that is building on your domain expertise. You're an expert software engineer. You understand DevOps. You've been an ALM ranger. You can do everything from code it through, deploy it, release it, build the infrastructure as code, etc. Yeah. So deep experience there. You've got years of experience in this agility space. You're a professional Scrum trainer. You're a pro Kanban trainer. You get all of it. You understand more than that. You've worked in scaling environments, etc. So the mashup of those two together gives you a depth of experience, credibility, to be able to consult and mentor as well as coach, because you got that domain expertise. And I would suggest you need some domain expertise to be able to consult, and an awareness of it to be a more effective coach.
But on the other side of that, I wouldn't feel comfortable or feel competent coaching, for example, a group of people who deliver marketing. Because well, maybe I do have some context in marketing, right? Because I have to do it for my own business. But let's say I didn't, or coaching police officers, right? That's an interesting one. I did an engagement many years ago. I know you were involved in it as well, Simon, where I did Scrum training for police officers. Now, I felt very uncomfortable teaching those classes because I didn't feel like I understood their context. I felt like I was super clear on telling them that I didn't understand their context, right? I don't want to say, oh, I know how you're going to solve all your problems, and I don't, right? So I can't consult. But I felt like we got enough of common ground to be able to generate questions and discovery on how they could use, I'm teaching Scrum, right? So how they can use Scrum within their context to do the thing we were focusing on, which was organizational change. But some of the most interesting conversations in those classes actually wasn't on that topic. It was with the head of CID, who was in the class. If you're American, that would be detectives, head of chief of detectives, who was asking very specific questions about how he could use these tools within the context of solving a case, right? Because that's a thing you don't know when it's going to finish. You don't know how complex it's going to be. You don't know what you're going to discover. There's going to be potentially all sorts of surprises along the way if you're investigating a murder. And obviously, I had no idea of the context, but I was able to have a conversation. But that I felt was not my, I don't know how to describe it, like sweet spot, bivouac. I don't know what word I would use to.
But it becomes an ethical point then.
Yeah.
Where you as an individual will call out where you're on the periphery of your skill set or understanding and work with the client. Now, I've worked with teams in many domains that I had a vague idea what they did. So I worked with a legal team and I knew roughly what they did, but I then doubled down on that Scrum Master stance. I am the master of the framework. Like, I really get how this framework works. I can teach you the details of the framework. I can emphasize the principles of using the force of the Scrum values: focus, openness, respect, courage, and commitment, to build trust, to enable transparency, inspection, adaptation.
Yep.
Now, from that stance of the principles, I was able to help them reflect on what they needed to do to be more effective as a collective. And this is where it became more coaching than consulting, because you invited reflection and asked questions to inspire deeper thought where they would choose the right way. Now, that was off the back of a lot of experience with frameworks. And occasionally I would ask, is it okay if I share this practice, or is it okay if I share this particular thing because it may be useful to you? Have you ever considered visualizing your work? How do you communicate? How do you synchronize? What are you going to do if someone's on holidays? And that guided that team to a better way of doing things. And that tends to be more coachy, right? Because you're asking questions to help the person elicit understanding, or the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I can really see that, and I definitely been starting down the route of separating in my head that idea of agile coaching and agile consulting. But I think there is something that I see in agile coaching that has been troubling, at least for me, and that's two things. And I think it happens at different levels, because I do feel like an agile coach is a scrum master with delusions of grandeur and $200 a day more. That's how I think about it, right? I know it's more nuanced than that, but I've had a number of calls recently with people who are looking to become scrum masters or agile coaches. And when talking to them about what is their experience, they don't have any in either of those things. They don't have any experience. They want to come into IT and coach IT teams, and they have zero experience in IT. Their knowledge of Scrum comes from perhaps taking a 2-day class. Their knowledge of Agile in general comes from reading a few books in the Agile Manifesto. And they want to come into that Agile coaching role or Agile or Scrum Master role. And I feel like both of those roles are not introductory roles. They're not.
I passionately agree with you. I think Scrum Master is not, and it's not your first job out of university. Now, I'm sure there are many people in the world who think that Scrum Master isn't a real job anyway, and I disagree with that, because they're there to help the team use the framework. And if your team are becoming effective, you will find your time helping the organization understand what needs to change about the system. And so there's a degree of maturity to be able to challenge the organization on their organizational behaviors and the transactions they conduct with each other, so that they can create a better space for their teams. And so I hear your concern about people thinking, "Oh, I can do that. That seems coachy. I've got coaching skills. I'm a life coach. I get that. I can now become a Scrum Master because it pays well."
Yep.
And
I mean, I totally understand the allure, right? I mean, we're all here to further our careers, do well, perhaps do something, hopefully do something we enjoy. I prefer that one. Do something we enjoy, and get something out of it. But my advice is always for those folks, certainly the ones that have no experience yet, is to go join a Scrum team and do something in IT, learn something in IT, go join a Scrum team, provide value to that team, demonstrate to that team that you have competence in helping them solve some of the more complex problems in their organization or how they interact with other people in the organization. Demonstrate your ability to do those things, and they'll select you as their Scrum Master, even if they have somebody who's officially their Scrum Master, right? This is the person who's been given the job, but nobody could ask. But they're not picking up the accountability, and you're doing the things. The team's going to select you.
yeah,
And if you're successful,
right?
Yeah, you're making a difference. And if you're successful, then that will be recognized in the organization. You are effectively you've become the Scrum Master through actually doing the thing, right, and providing value to the team.
And the actions that you perform define your accountability, and that's when you become the change agent, the true leader that serves. When you're resolving challenges, when you're speaking truth to power, when you're holding the magic mirror up against the organization and just reminding them about how the process works, supporting other people, helping your developers get to done, helping your product owner articulate value and address ordering of the product backlog. All of this stuff. Now, I would suggest that becomes very hard to do if you haven't any experience in delivering anything in a team environment. And that's why the first place you got to do is, like you say, you need to join a team and help them deliver something so that at least you can empathize and understand the trials and tribulations of being in a team delivering something.
Yeah, what skill are you bringing to the team in the first place that allows you to cut your teeth?
Yeah.
And gain that experience that you need to understand how teams deliver stuff so that you can then help them deliver stuff. I always...
Sorry?
It's okay. I always think that too many times in organizations can consider the Scrum Master to be like a junior role. Like, who's the newest person in the team? Right, you're the Scrum Master now. And they wonder why it doesn't help them, why it doesn't provide any value. It's because I think there's a great, I can't remember the cartoon, but it has the Scrum Master you asked for, the Scrum Master the team needs, and it's a picture of a scarred up Rambo dude, right, with tattoos and scars. And it's the Scrum Master they got, and it's dressed up as a baby with a nappy on, right? That's the Scrum Master that teams need, is the one that is going to help enact change within the organization to help them be more effective. And that's almost impossible if you don't understand what they're doing.
What you've just highlighted there is the difference between professional Scrum and mechanical Scrum. So professional Scrum is where each person in their accountabilities is striving to increase value and continuously improve. A lot of organizations, they struggle with that, and that's where you get this whole agile delivery manager. Well, look, we're not going to let go of our command and control. We still want to work in these long cycles. We're really not interested in pushing back on heavy bureaucracy. We want people who are going to process timesheets, do job reviews, not rock the status quo. And effective Scrum Masters should be gently, consistently challenging the status quo, because that's how you improve, right? And highlighting areas and addressing it. And there's one or two situations where, shall we say, by mutual agreement, myself and the client parted company, because
Sure.
once your team starts delivering done, you start demonstrating where other areas of the organization are ineffectual or ineffective.
Sure.
And so it's either your stakeholders can't keep up with demand, or whatever your release mechanism is slow, cumbersome, unwieldy. And you then start trying to surge releases through a pipe that can't cope, and you'll hit more bureaucracy than you can believe. And it's where you actually highlight that the organization is not focused on value delivery, and there's a degree of complacency, and that's not the way we do it around here, and we've always done it this way, and how dare you challenge it.
One of my favorite articles is the US DoD how to detect agile bullshit article. It's one of my favorite papers.
And you can find that really easily if you just go into your
search
search engine of choice and DoD Agile BS.
Yeah, DoD Agile BS, and there's a lot more in it than the bit that I kind of latch onto and like. It's probably my DevOps background, right? That there's two particular things I latch onto. One is they have at the bottom of they have this kind of graph with a little flow chart, and they have a bunch of questions. They have 6 questions, and yes is good, and no leads to a bubble that says Agile BS on it, right? And I'm not saying that this is the only litmus test, but this is a litmus test from an organization that is not usually known for its ability to change, its agility, its forward-lookingness. And the two that really stood out for me, the first one is top left, and the way let's see if I can remember this. It's usable working product delivered to real users every iteration, including the first. Working usable product delivered to real users every iteration, including the first. And so many teams that I work with, that I see, that I talk to, are not able to do that. Even teams that talk a good talk about Agile and DevOps. And I almost feel like it's this influx of not unscarred, it's probably unscarred Scrum Masters and Agile coaches who are willing, or maybe the expression is too willing, to meet people where they are, right? Maybe the two expressions that I hear a lot in Agile that I find go back to that idea of the don't understand it necessarily coach, the life coach angle, is the meet people where they are, which I agree with to an extent, but there's a line there, right? You can't meet people wherever they are. You need to bring them to a certain point in order to be able to achieve something. And what's the other one? I've forgotten now. It's the other. I can't remember. I'm sure I'll remember later. But that I'm all for helping people get on board from where their organization currently stands. Right? How do we move forward? But sometimes we accept dysfunctional behavior too much, and the experience of an Agile coach or Scrum Master should be able to do going into an organization is be able to say, when a team says to them, because we hear this all the time, our software is too big and too complicated to be able to do continuous delivery. Our software can't be, there's no way we can create a working product in 2 weeks. That's impossible.
Yeah.
And you need to have the grizzled battle scars to be able to say, That's bullshit. That is just not fundamentally true. If the
And that's the
Windows
challenge.
team...
That's what you're describing is like years ago, Ken Schwaber wrote an article about Scrum Butt.
Yep.
And people got upset about it going, you can't call it Scrum Butt. And it's like the pattern is, yes, we do Scrum, but here's what we don't do. And this is where some people struggle with the immutability of Scrum or the clarity of Kanban, saying, oh, we do Kanban, but we don't use WIP limits. Well, you're not doing Kanban. We do Scrum, but we don't have a daily Scrum every day. Well, you're not doing a Scrum. Oh, we do Scrum, but we don't have a done increment every sprint. Well, you're not doing Scrum. And
yep.
Having the clarity of thought and the actual discipline to say, look, we can help you. All right. At the moment, you're not doing Scrum because of here, here, and here. You haven't got the 3 accountabilities filled, or, you need the 3 accountabilities, 3 artifacts, 3 commitments, 5 events done with a done increment every sprint, less than a month, to call it Scrum. If you're not doing that, you're not doing Scrum yet. And my first challenge as an Agile coach is to get you to do Scrum if you say you want to do Scrum. Or if we're doing Kanban, we need to visualize our workflow. We need to define it, visualize it, put some work in progress limits, and then start tracking the metrics to continuously improve. But if I just throw some stuff up on a wall with some sticky notes, you're visualizing your work, but that's not Kanban. But you need to be able to call that out. And I've had this challenge from a number of people going, oh, you're being dogmatic. And I don't think it is dogmatism. And I think this is a really important point. If you're an Agile consultant or an Agile coach, you must be able to determine whether people are using a framework or a method. You need to understand that framework or method enough to recognize it. And my favorite example of this is like if we get a piece of dough, put some sauce and cheese on it and bake it, it's a pizza, right? But if I fold it over, it's a calzone. Now, both are great, and I'll, happily eat either one. But you can't call a pizza a calzone or a calzone a pizza because they're different things. And that's without even getting into the debate of whether pineapple belongs on a pizza or not.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there's a lot of folks who come into this from that life coach. My other concern about this area is with the commodification. There's been a surge of people wanting to join agility. And this is where there's been a demand for Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, support people to help organizations change. And so you end up with a lot of people, a lot of consultancies, a lot of contracts out there looking for people who are Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, etc. And they get put in this position often from, if you're an employee of a consultancy, you just get put in there. And they may not have actually met the criteria. So I think, that criteria of knowing a framework, Scrum, knowing Kanban, knowing extreme programming, understanding the principles, being able to facilitate, coach, mentor, challenge, they don't necessarily meet that bar, but they get put in because, hey, you're a consultant and it's just process stuff anyway. So we'll just chuck you in here.
Well, and maybe they're available, right? I mean, part of the issue is that demand for Agile coaches and Scrum Masters is far outstripping the ability of the market to deliver good Agile coaches and Scrum Masters.
Well, it was. I think 23 is going to be an interesting year with the massive cutbacks in big tech. So at the time we're recording, Facebook and Instagram have just announced another 10 or 11,000 job cuts.
Yep.
So
I think that it's going to be interesting because a lot of the job cuts is an interesting topic as well, right? Because a lot of these organizations hired a lot of people during lockdown to deal with the increased demand and load on their systems. I mean, what did Teams go from? I think Teams went from 70 million monthly active users to 270,000 monthly active users practically overnight. Right? That level of demand puts huge amounts of different sorts of pressure on your system, and suddenly you're having to rewrite huge swathes of your code base because they just no longer perform at the levels you need them to perform at. And teams had other issues with the 4x4. If you remember, at the beginning of lockdown, you could only see 4 people at once, 2x2.
So let's just agree to disagree on the value of teams.
Sure, absolutely. But video conferencing, right? They all had exactly the same problem. And during in 2020, between 2020 and 2021, Microsoft hired 77,000 more people.
Wow.
To deal with that demand and that capability. Now there are people going back to the office, right? I'm a big, I know you're a big in-person person.
I love
you love in person. I love virtual, hanging out with people. Whoa, why would I want to do that, right? I love the virtual experience and the reach that you can get through virtual. It's, both are great, but a percentage of the people that are currently doing virtual are going back to the office, which means the demand curve has reduced. The level of demand on the software has reduced, and maybe they don't need quite so many people anymore that they hired during that period.
Also, we've started to figure it out, and I think we're straying way off the topic here, but there was a huge amount of presenteeism when we initially flipped to virtual. Everybody was so nervous about what other people were doing at the office. There was this demand that people were in meetings constantly, which created another surge demand. And this is the difference between a real agile coach and not. Is an agile coach would have been pushing back, saying, look, we should be very careful and protect our people's calendars, because if they're in events all the time, if they're in meetings all the time, when are they going to get any work done?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that brings it back, ties it back to the experience, right? Without the experience to know that's one of the biggest impacts I've found with teams is the calendar thing, right? I worked with an organization, and they couldn't understand why they couldn't get work done. We were literally sitting around with the whole team. The project manager was there, and they're like, why can't we get anything done? And I said, well, how long's your average coding task? Maybe 4 hours was their average coding task. I'm like, so if you're a coder and you've got a meeting in 2 hours, do you start that 4-hour task? It's like, well, no, you don't, because you want to wait for a 4-hour uninterrupted block so you can focus and get that thing done. So it gets delayed by days and days and days because you don't have that. And the project manager's like, whoa, we've got all this time. We've got all this time. I'm like, awesome. I just picked a developer around the table and said, can you put your calendar up on that projector? And they put their calendar up on that projector, and there was no 4-hour time slot anywhere in their week. Yeah, anywhere in their week at all.
And the other thing is that when we moved to virtual, we saw a huge uptake in tools like Teams, like Slack, WhatsApp, and that pinging interruption. I'm not sure how it affects you. I have to shut all that stuff off. If I want to get something done, I have to close all that down. And that awareness of how people work, of the need for protected time, like this is all another aspect of agile consulting, agile coaching. The stop starting, start finishing, get into flow, helping people get into that space, which if you've been in a team and if you've worked as a scrum master, like if you've earned your stripes, then you'll know that that's something you need to do. And
I just want to, because the pushback I get a lot with that mindset about the experience required to be an agile coach or a scrum master is so where does the junior scrum master come from? And I always come back with there's no such thing as a junior scrum master. It's somebody battle hardened from your team who's got long experience doing that thing, who becomes the scrum master for the team.
Yeah, and it's like you were saying earlier. Where does the senior scrum master come from? There's no such thing. There's scrum masters.
Yeah,
like you're a scrum master. There's no such thing as a junior or a senior. Now I know that you'll get job adverts for it.
Sure. Yeah.
And this is where the whole junior senior thing comes from, because people are trying to get different day rates, and and this is your observation that an agile coach is just another way of being a scrum master and getting 200 extra
$200
a day
more.
Now,
Yeah,
I would suggest that there should be more criteria to actually qualify as an agile consultant or agile coach. It's not just, and you need to be thinking about mentoring people into that space. But it's like where do architects come from? Well, typically they start off as coders or testers, and then they mature to the point that they can then architect products, right?
Yep.
And I think
Aren't scrum masters and agile coaches are architects of team organization and team structure and engagement and
Now, my question for you is, and it's one that's been rattling around, well, since I joined scrum.org, and Ken deliberately chose the name professional.
Yep.
And he posed this question back then is, if I wish to be an engineer and a practicing engineer, I have to pass a process to become a recognized certified engineer. If I wish to become a practicing accountant, I have to pass a process. It's not just proving the studies. I actually have to process with some rigor to qualify as a chartered accountant in the UK. If I want to be a practicing legal person, there's a process for that. Now, given that many of these other safety critical, role critical environments, like if I want to become a commercial pilot, there's exams I've got to take. I've got to prove it.
Well, they don't just let you go fly a plane, right? They don't let you do that.
But the pilot only flies it for 3% of the time. It's on autopilot mostly. Why would you need to get somebody to qualify up and clock thousands of hours before you're allowed to fly aircraft full of people somewhere? So where do we go in this industry of agile? How do we self-manage, right? We keep claiming that we're self-managing and we're empirical. What would your suggestion be in this space of agile coach, agile consultant?
I think it's interesting because none of those bodies or accreditations that you mentioned are self-organizing. They're all imposed, right? At some point, the governments of the world came in and said, no, you can't fly a plane without, or you can't do that. You can't publish, you can't do the accounts without having an accountancy. You can't sell this product unless it meets this regulatory compliance, right? I think I don't know if this is something that can be self-regulated, because you can only self-regulate in the context of a small community, right?
Okay.
So if you this is I'm noodling here, so hold on. I feel like when things get too big and there's too many people involved, the chances of having, and I'm going to use an expression, I don't really mean it this way, but a bad actor, right, increases, because maybe there's only, like maybe in the agile space, 0.1% are bad actors, right? And it used to be that 0.1% 20 years ago was maybe one person somewhere, right? One or two people somewhere were being dicks, right? And that's just the way they were. and everybody else just knew it and worked around it and were able to do their thing, and companies were successful because the chances of getting those people were pretty small. But now there's hundreds of thousands of people in that space, so the number of bad actors is much greater. Or I don't mean that bad actor doesn't necessarily mean deliberate, right?
It's what I'm hearing you say is that it's a statement of volume, and that as the number of people who are engaging in an activity is, the range of skill and competence becomes broader, and so your tail becomes thicker. As soon as you started going down this and saying it's external, there's a famous Latin quote, which is "Quis custodiet ipsos custodes," who watches the watchers, who polices the policeman. And this is interesting, given that there is like the International Coaching Federation is the de rigueur coaching body. The International Facilitation is the de rigueur facilitation body. There isn't an equivalent for anything pan-agile, and given that some of the agility is very tribal, which is sad, and also against the agile principles, but that's another story. What would your recommendation be for an individual or an organization, for an individual who would like to become an accredited agile coach, or for an organization that is looking for an agile coach or a consultant?
I mean, I don't see anything official out there. But if you asked me to go find somebody, I'm going to be looking for somebody that I know, again, reducing the size of the community, right?
Yep.
I know that has that competence, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a PST, although I know a lot of really competent PSTs. I also know some really competent CSTs as well that I would trust to bring in and help me with something in an organization. So for me, there is no current standard. I know people who have a PSM1, for example, that are awesome. I know some that know nothing. They're just assessment takers, right?
Yeah, I had the same experience when I was a software engineer, way back when I was actually writing coding for a living. And you'd have people who would come in and they had all the Microsoft certifications. They had the MCSD, but they were ineffectual at solving problems and helping us deliver value. Now, I think you immediately went for the trainer level, which may be good at training, but they may not be effective.
They may not be good coaches, right?
And this is where I think IC Agile have got a pretty solid program helping people build skills up in that space. I think this is where the Scrum Alliance have got some programs about coaching in there. Scrum.org doesn't have an offering in that space. So I don't think the Kanban University is trying to grow some into that space so that they can have Kanban coaches. So I think there is different tracks and pathways across it. If it was up to me, I'd be looking for some demonstrated understanding of Scrum, some demonstrated understanding of Kanban, some demonstrated understanding of something else, an ability to coach, facilitate, and train. How you do that, you'd probably be
because the question's going to be, I'm a big organization. I need to hire some Agile coaches. I've got 1,000 CVs sitting on my desk because I said, I'd like to get some Agile coaches at some point, where somebody overheard, and suddenly I've got 1,000 CVs on my desk. How do I filter those CVs so that I have a manageable group of people to interview, and there's just nothing for them?
and this is where you end up with the keyword search, or what I've seen is a lot of larger organizations, they'll just turn around and seek out a partner,
Yeah.
And let the partner do it all. And
Let the partner do it.
you can understand why. And then it's basically the keyword searches and just getting people in. So it's.
But then we also hit. And I think this is where Agile is fundamentally different from something like just an engineering qualification, right? I don't think anything in the Agile space can scale, because as soon as it scales, it becomes not Agile, right?
So you need to, where I've seen it work well is where you create pockets of excellence and then you train and grow the people to then go and organically grow it within their organization. It's not something you can like flick a switch and flip an organization.
But the difficulty is that I keep throwing buts at you, right? But the big organizations, they don't want to let every department and every team in every department go hire the people they need, right? Which is because for an Agile coach to work and be effective, or a Scrum Master to work and be effective, they have to be a fit for the organization, for the culture, for the team. You could get the most awesome, the top tier Scrum Master in the world, put them in a particular team, and it just bombs, right?
But it's exactly like dating, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's teams that you'll work for, and you're like, you and I could go into two different teams, and they might like us, but you and I are similar in many ways.
Sure.
Because we have a tendency for over directness, and this is where you'll need a range of styles, because it's complementary. You know it's got to fit with the team. And if we're now blurring into the whole organizational change thing, has anyone asked the teams whether they want to work this way? Which is another challenge. Like, would you like to try this experiment?
The image, again, like you said, it's blurring into organizational change, because the image I have in my head of what does this look like as being successful, right? It looks like every team having their own budget, every team or every group having their own budget to be able to go and engage with the people that make the most sense for them, right? Whether there's no point in going to a big coaching organization and saying we want 500 Agile coaches, and you get a bunch of people that know Scrum really well, don't know Kanban, and there's a bunch of Kanban teams going, who the hell is this person telling me how to do things differently than we want to do it?
That is impractical at scale, because there needs to be some coordination or consistency, and I'll leave that for another day. So just to circle back to where we started, I'm not sure we've actually addressed the question. Well, I think we have, but we haven't quite clearly stated it, that for a life coach to become an Agile coach, they actually need to build experience delivering a product, and they need to build out their knowledge of Agile frameworks, methods, practices, and techniques to augment. So yes, you can, but it's going to take some graft. For an Agile consultant to become an Agile coach, they will need to build their coaching skills so that they can then apply principles with beyond their technical domain. Is that where we're converging on?
I think that is where we're converging on. I would add a little bit more, because I feel like quite often it seems like people conflate coaching with life coaching. And I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. I feel like life coaching is a subset of coaching. It's one set of skills that are part of coaching. So if you are a life coach and you've got experience being a life coach, if you added all those other things that you would need to be an agile coach, the knowledge, the additional skills, the facilitation, mentorship, all of those things that are not necessarily part of this piece over here, you're then actually no longer that anyway.
No,
right? Your greater skill, your greater competence is in the other part of this pie than just this tiny piece, which is life coaching. And I feel like you could have all of those other things and not have life coaching and be an incredibly successful agile coach.
No, I think you'd be an agile consultant.
Without life coaching, what about all the other coaching? You could go do an IC Agile and you're not a life coach, right?
I mean coaching. Sorry.
Yes.
I thought so you need some coaching skills, not
Oh, absolutely.
To be an agile coach,
you need coaching skills. I think you need coaching skills to be an agile consultant as well. Because you're not necessarily it's probably been I guess maybe I'm projecting, right? I feel like I might be projecting there that I used to be a DevOps consultant. That was ALM consultant, if you want to be more specific, right? That was my I'm that old. That was my bag, and I would be effectively parachuted in. I'd have a week on site with the customer, and I've got to fix their stuff. So you're not there for pleasantries. You're not there for long-term coaching. You're there to fundamentally point at the problem and say, this is the problem. You need to fix this. Give me the credentials and we can go fix it now together, right? That we need to fix this now.
But as Stephanie and I, we created the model for our book where we came up with the choices, the stances, the choices that you make as a Scrum Master that are now in the Professional Scrum Master course. And coaching is clearly one of those. So I would suggest you're not even an effective Scrum Master unless you have some rudimentary capabilities in coaching. And it doesn't mean you're a counselor or a life coach. And it's the eight choices. So you've got point north, teaching, mentoring, upholding Scrum, taking action, facilitation, coaching, actively do nothing.
That's my favorite one.
Actively doing nothing, it's the hardest one to do.
That's that's why it's an
asking you and I not to speak. It's a challenge.
Not going to work. It's not going to work. Simon, don't have an opinion on this topic. Right? It's not going to work for sure. I do believe that coaching is valuable. And I feel like I will point out that I have no official coaching credentials. Anything that I do is learned coaching. I don't know how, probably just describe that. I've always been very disappointed with any coaching classes that I've taken because I feel like I want to focus on team and organization coaching. And the thing they teach you in all the classes is one-on-one coaching, and that's not something I'm very interested in.
So this is where the techniques can be applied. So I have done the IC Agile coaching, did Stephanie's coaching course. I've done an ORSC rudimentary course, and I've done a brain-based Agile coaching certificate, which was like 6 months worth of work. And I'm working towards becoming an ICF ACC. And it is trying to find the coaching pattern that fits you, because there's various different coaching schools out there, and you got to find the one that works for you. That's
what I've not. Yeah, absolutely. They're all valid. That's what I've not been able to find. I did the introductory ORSC one. Were we in the same cohort? Scrum.org did the thing. Yeah. That was one that I was very I think it popped. Have you heard that expression? Popped my bubble, right? I had a picture of what, especially being that it was called organizational systems coaching, right? I'm like, well, I want to coach at the organization, not at one-on-one an individual. and I felt like that bubble was popped enough that I was then taking the class in a negative mindset, right? Because I was disappointed from the outset. I've had that happen to me quite a few times. I think that's a little bit of my Asperger's kicking in, right, as well. I heard I got the stories from some of the other coaching, and I just didn't find anything that I really connected with yet. Oh, there is one that I connected with, but it's not a big coaching thing. It's this dude's coaching thing. I'm not even going to be able to remember his name. He's Spanish. He's a CST, I'm pretty sure. Yes, he's a CST. I met him at a conference, and he explained his coaching ethos, and I just really connected with that. So I want to take his class. I'll need to find out. My memory is terrible for names. I suck at names. Terrible. Which is fun.
This is where I found the brain-based coaching. It really resonated with me because it fundamentally steeped in neuroscience, and here are some patterns that can help you coach someone else. And it provided a session pattern, and it also provided a 12 session pattern to help somebody improve. And it just ups your coaching game, and it leans into all the things that coaching training gives you, which is active listening, reflecting, making sure that you've heard, confirming things, but the emphasis is on thinking. So what are you thinking?
I took Lisa Atkins' coaching stance.
Say again?
I did Lisa Atkins' coaching stance. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. So that was, I think we both did that. Different classes. Scrum.org put us on that way long ago. So I think we where did we get to?
Where did we get to in what we're talking about, or where did we get to in our outcome? Yeah, what we're talking about. So, I think we covered quite a lot of topics, to be honest. We were a little bit scatterbrained, but that's okay. We started off at life coaching. I think we've kind of come back around and full circled that. I'm not sure we've answered the question fully. I'm sure it'll come up again, right? I think I feel like we had a great discussion on all of the things that impact on our understanding of Agile Coach, Agile Consultant. What's the difference between the two? I feel like my mind has been opened on some of the nuance there. I had some but that's why I like talking to you, Simon, right? Because I have a lot of pre-assumptions, you have a lot of pre-assumptions, and we can bounce our pre-assumptions off each other and try and figure out some things.
That's called conversation, right?
Yeah, having a conversation is kind of fun. And it doesn't need to be in person, Simon. You can do it this way too.
It's better with beer, Martin. It's always better with beer. Or whiskey.
Or coffee. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of at a good wrapping up point.
Cool.
Did you have fun today?
I did. I always enjoy our discussions. We cover some broad terrain, and I think about stuff, which is always good. So, thanks, Hench.
No, thanks for this is a great idea.